Just before 1 a.m. on the 26th of May 2018, Fiona Mitchell heard her beloved dog Chopper going mad barking in the back garden of her home in Priorswood and Coolock on Dublin's north side. She went to investigate, and when she looked out of her kitchen window, she saw two men on the back wall. Clearly, Fiona's a lot braver than most of us, well, me anyway, because she then went to the patio doors to get a closer look, and as she stared out, she suddenly realised she was looking at the man whose face she instantly recognised staring back at her, and he was holding a gun. Like something straight out of a Hollywood horror film, Fiona bolted for the hallway, slamming and locking the kitchen door behind her. And as she ran, she screamed at her son Jason, who was playing computer games in the sitting room, to get the hell out of the house. Jason didn't need to be told twice. He jumped through a window into the front garden. And in the meantime, his mother was running through the front door while the sound of gunshots exploded behind her. In the aftermath, the gardaí found 4 bullets. One was lodged in the decking in the back garden. One was located in the kitchen. And another was found in the front garden. A ballistics inspection was able to tell them it had been fired from the kitchen and went through the front door. Heartbreakingly, the 4th bullet killed Fiona's poor German Shepherd dog, Chopper. Fiona has always been adamant that she knows exactly who climbed over her back wall that night and stormed into her house firing a gun. And she told a court that was Robbie Lawlor. The Dublin woman unwittingly became Lawlor's target after he found out that another one of her sons, Derek, had begun a relationship with Rachel Kerwin. You'll remember that Kerwin is the mother of 2 of Lawlor's children, and the pair first got together in 2006 and were a couple for the guts of a decade. In fact, Kerwin had been arrested a few times with Lawlor. But then they broke up, and in the run-up to Christmas 2017, Lawlor discovered that Kerwin was seeing someone else, and he was not happy about it. Now, it should be made clear that in December 2019, after a dramatic and at times emotional court case, Lawlor was found by a jury to be not guilty of 5 charges against him, and these included threatening to murder Derek Mitchell, attempting to murder Derek Mitchell's mother Fiona, and possessing a gun, and of killing Chopper the dog. Nonetheless, Fiona Mitchell maintains to this day that it was Robbie Lawlor in her back garden that night holding a gun. And given what would happen next, few of us would doubt her story. I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're listening to Double Cross, the Murder of Robbie Lawlor, a Crime World special investigation podcast based on my new book, Web of Betrayal. When Lawlor discovered his former girlfriend was in a new relationship, it drove him insane, a state of mind not helped by his copious drug use. He spent weeks intimidating and threatening Kerwin, trying to force her to dump Derek Mitchell, but she refused. In the initial statement she made to gardaí, Kerwin told them how Lawlor had promised to kill Derek's mother, Fiona, leaving him grieving for 2 weeks and then put him out of his misery. She also said that Lawlor had threatened to blow Derek's head off, blow his ma's head off, and leave her with nothing. She said the threats were constant from the minute he found out about herself and Derek. On the night of the attack on Fiona Mitchell's house, Kerwin received a phone call from Detective Garda Noel Smith, and he told her that she should be careful, that Lawlor was extremely agitated. During Lawlor's trial in December 2019, Detective Smith gave evidence describing how on the night of the shooting he met Lawlor at about 10:25 p.m. in Laytown, County Meath, near the house where he was living with his mother. Lawlor was dressed, he said, all in black leggings, black runners and a black jacket. Detective Smith said Lawlor was agitated and aggressive towards the gardaí, adding that he was quite erratic in his behaviour.
His interactions, he would be polite enough.
This is Christy Mangan. He is a former chief superintendent in the Garda Síochána. He hoped to quietly wind down to retirement after 4 decades in the force when he found himself in charge in Drogheda and the surrounding region.
You know, he wasn't going to be putting it up to the guards now. Invariably, there would be 2 or 3 guards stopping him anywhere. He was an engaging enough sort of a person. He knew better than to take on a number of guards look at no more than any other criminals. It depends on their humour. Sometimes they might be very abusive towards you, or other times they're very, very pleasant for whatever reason on that particular time or particular day. Maybe they have something concealed on their body. They might have drugs on them or something. So it just depends on their humour. Other criminals, quite volatile. They literally try at all stages to assault you, to intimidate you, threaten you, threaten your family, threaten people that you know. So he wouldn't have been that difficult to deal with. He wouldn't have been that difficult, but depends on the circumstances with them too.
Later that night, he went to Lawlor's home and spoke to his mother, Cecilia Dillon. He told the court that he formed the opinion that Miss Dillon had some concerns about Robert's behaviour. As a result, he made the decision to alert the Armed Support Unit, and that's when he phoned Rachel Kirwan. Again, in that first statement she made to the guards, Kirwan told them the phone call left her nervous, naturally enough, and that she had a feeling he was going to hurt me and Derek. She must have had a half-decent relationship with Fiona Mitchell because she spent most of the rest of the night on the phone to her. The court heard how they rang each other every 15 to 20 minutes, and during one phone call, Kirwan said she heard a dog barking in the background at Fiona's house. She told gardaí that she heard Fiona say, "Hang on, why is that dog barking?" And then she heard her screaming, he's here, it's happening." The next thing she heard, she told the officers, were gunshots. "I thought she was dead," she told them. "I thought she was gone. If she had died, I would have had to carry that around for the rest of my life." But while Fiona was adamant that she instantly recognised one of the men holding a gun in her garden as being Robbie Lawlor, there was one rather big problem with her evidence, and that was that she'd never met him. She told the court that her view of him was 100% and that she'd no doubt of who she'd seen. That since she'd been told he'd made a threat against her life, she'd relentlessly studied photographs and videos of him on Facebook and Instagram. She explained that she wanted to know what he looked like and described herself as stalking him almost on the internet since February of 2018. Lawlor's defence barrister, however, argued that her evidence was neither reliable nor truthful, and he warned a jury that identification evidence is dangerous, particularly when a witness insists they're 100% certain they're right. The prosecution barrister said Fiona had never wavered from the evidence she gave from the night of the shooting, that she saw Lawlor and that she could identify him because she'd been stalking him online. But the biggest problem for the prosecution during the trial was caused actually by Rachel Kirwan, because when she took the stand, she told the court that her initial statement to the gardaí was, well, it was one big lie. She claimed that after Fiona told her there was no doubt that Lawlor was the gunman who fired the shots into her house and who killed her dog, that she wanted to paint him in the worst light possible. According to Kirwan, Fiona also told her there was fingerprint and DNA evidence to prove Lawlor was guilty, and because she felt riddled with guilt, she believed she had to do and say whatever she could to get him off the streets. She also told the court that it wasn't true that Lawlor made threats to her against her boyfriend Derek Mitchell and his mother Fiona. Somewhat surprisingly, she said she was still in a relationship with Derek Mitchell, but it was on and off. With the conflicting evidence and one of the star witnesses insisting she'd lied throughout her statement, it took the jury at the Central Criminal Court just 2 hours and 40 minutes to find Lawlor not guilty of all 5 charges against him. I'm fairly certain those 12 good men and women who knew nothing about Lawlor's background were slightly discombobulated to find the accused mouthing "thank you" over to them as each of the verdicts were read out. And just like that, on the afternoon of Monday the 9th of December 2019, Lawlor was back on the streets, free to wreak more havoc.
So we were alerted to the fact that was happening, that he was getting out, and that we would have, we ourselves realised we would have a major problem. And then you have to include him in your plans when you're, on a daily basis. Every morning we would have carried out an assessment of what was taking place, what the temperature was within the criminal fraternity, coupled with dealing with your normal policing issues. So we would have looked at that and saw that the minute Robbie was in town, there was a huge heightened anxiety among the criminals themselves. You could see the fear among people. Absolutely, the criminals themselves were terrified.
If Robbie Lawlor had been volatile before he was arrested for attempting to kill Fiona Mitchell, his mood on his release had hit stratospheric levels. Almost exactly a month before he walked free from the Dublin Central Criminal Court, his brother-in-law and close long-term associate Richie Carberry was assassinated outside his house in Bettystown in County Meath. His murder didn't come as any great surprise. The 39-year-old had been officially warned by gardaí that his life was under grave threat, and he previously survived a murder attempt at his home on the night of the 5th of March 2019. After that attack, Carberry had kitted out his house with bulletproof windows, and it's been reported since that he was planning to move to Manchester with his wife and 3 kids. But at 11:40pm on the 4th of November 2019, a gunman sprayed bullets at him as he got out of his Audi car. His wife Eileen, Robbie Lawlor's sister, and their daughters tried to help him until the paramedics arrived, but the father of 3 died later in hospital. Carberry was the second murder to happen as a result of the Drogheda feud. Earlier that year, on the 27th of August, Keith Brannigan was working on the decking of a mobile home in a caravan park in Clogherhead, County Louth, when he was shot dead in broad daylight. The 29-year-old, who had just celebrated his first wedding anniversary, was not considered to be a major criminal. Instead, it's believed he was targeted by associates of Drogheda gang leader Owen Maguire, who you'll remember was left paralysed after being shot by Robbie Lawlor in July 2018. Brannigan was known to be good friends with the leader of a rival Drogheda gang. His death, it's thought, was nothing more than a way to get at Maguire's enemy, a tragic and futile example of collateral damage. It was into this hostile and charged atmosphere that Lawlor was released in early December. Little wonder the gardaí were tense about what might happen next. They didn't have long to wait.
Drogheda is a very prosperous town for many years of an expanding population. It's 41,000 plus at the moment, along with Dundalk, be the 2 largest towns, expanding towns in Ireland. So I suppose, like all towns and villages in Ireland, it had its difficulty with crime and certainly with drug dealing because of its position between North Dublin and the extension right up to the border. It's conveniently situated for certain families, criminal families who relocated around Bettystown, Mornington, and right into Drogheda itself. Cocaine use and abuse was absolutely rampant, and quickly identified, who the main drug dealers were. At that time, there was one very, very dominant grouping, and this was known locally as the Price Maguire organised crime group, and they were in control of basically the supply of all illicit drugs right from the border, Dundalk, up to Balbriggan, which is a fair chunk of an area to be controlling because it has a huge monetary value to the people involved. It's a multi-million euro business. At that time, it started to become obvious that there was a falling out between the main group and some of the younger members of it, which evolved into the anti-Price Maguire group, and that's what we called them for ease of reference at the time. So they started basically having fistfights. They were fighting on the street, catcalling, they were going on social media, taunting each other. And then it evolved into where some of the younger members of the anti-Maguire group, they got a couple of bad hidings, and they didn't take it too well because they were losing a lot of the fistfights on the street. And then they started to target members of the Price Maguire crew. They started up by damaging cars. That's initially what it was. They were smashing windscreens, throwing petrol bombs on cars. And then that evolved into attacking houses. And at one stage in the feud, we had over 34 houses which had been badly destroyed as a result of the activities on both sides. They started to threaten each other's girlfriends and partners, and they were threatening to throw acid in their faces. So that's what it had evolved into, and we certainly realised that we had a difficulty. There had been, a lot of serious crime had been committed by the original grouping that had been involved in murders. One of the earliest ones was Benjamin Whitehouse. He had been murdered in Balbriggan. And then also Willie Maughan and Anastasia Varsalana. Both of them went missing, were initially reported missing. It's now recorded as a murder investigation, a Dublin murder investigation. Normally, criminal groupings, when they fall out, they come to a realisation that if they don't stop, they'll end up in prison, or they'll end up losing a lot of the profits. But in this case, there was no relenting. They simply had made a decision on both sides that it was going to be a basic fight to the death. The incidents were so rampant and very serious. I actually had a serious consideration to calling in the army, because we didn't have the resources. We didn't have the armed resources to be dealing with this. People were getting shot. In this dispute, 4 people lost their lives. So in order to protect people, I gave very serious consideration to seeking the support of the army to come in. Now, that's not something that you do lightly. And we were also in the midst of ATM robberies. We had a huge amount of ATM robberies on the border, and we were also heavily involved in the investigation into the capital murder of Detective Garda Adrian Donoghue. And also we were dealing with the murder that took place for Garda Tony Golden. So any major case has huge resource implications for you as a manager. And when you've only limited resources and then they're all involved in all those other cases, it leaves very little to be out on the street. So you don't have the boots on the street, which you have to have a very visible presence in certain housing estates to make sure that antisocial behaviour is not taking place, that people are not out maybe riding scramblers across the grass areas and, damaging, like we had incidents up there where the local soccer club was attacked and their equipment was burnt out. So if you don't have that visible presence out there, people get a sense that they can do what they wish. And that's not something I wanted or needed to happen or needed to be happening. I suppose in the middle of it all, the arrival of Robbie Lawlor really inflamed it. Cornelius Price had got out of prison as well. So all of those actors arriving into a small town like Drogheda certainly didn't help the situation that was unfolding. Because the two of them were huge rivals. They were huge rivals in prison. They had a falling out in prison. They were intent on killing each other. Not alone that, then they were going to use the feud to assist them in their aims.
But while Gardaí triggered a nationwide alert after Lawlor's release because of fears of an escalation of attacks by those involved in the Drogheda feud, it was actually a decade-old murder that sparked the horrific events that led to one of the most gruesome killings this country has ever seen. As I explained earlier, since March 2009, Robbie Lawlor was suspected of shooting David Fred Lynch 4 times in the head with a handgun. The 26-year-old was found on a patch of wasteland off Belcamp Lane in Coolock. And despite the Gardaí's best efforts, Lawlor was never charged. But memories are long and grudges fester in the criminal underworld. And days after he was released after being found not guilty of trying to kill Fiona Mitchell, Lawlor was ambushed by a gang of youths after leaving a gym in Dublin city centre, and it's thought that at least one of those present was an associate of David, Fred Lynch. As is the way of the world now, the attack was filmed, and one of the thugs could be heard shouting, "This is only the start of it, Robbie."
Yes! That's only the start of it! That's only the start of it! That's only the start of it, Robbie!
Before running off, the gang stole Lawlor's gym bag. Not only was the attack posted all over social media, but over the next few days, Lawlor's assailants and rivals taunted and mocked him by posting photos of themselves wearing his black and white flip-flops that they'd taken from the bag. The full extent of Robbie Lawlor's heinous revenge would take several days to be fully revealed. But it started with a Facebook post on the 13th of January 2020. That afternoon, the sister of a teenager called Cian Mulready Woods put out an appeal for anyone who might have seen him in the previous 24 hours. The last time his family had heard from him was the day before, when he rang his mother. And the last reported sighting of him was at about 6 p.m. on the same day, on St. Dominic's Bridge in Drogheda. His sister pleaded for anyone with any information about his whereabouts to contact them. It was the beginning of the end. You've been listening to Double Cross, the Murder of Robbie Lawlor. This podcast is produced by Nicola Tallant and Ian Malini for Crime World Presents. Clodagh Meany and Alison Morris are assistant producers. The script is by Jane Finnegan. Graphics are by Enda Bulger. This podcast is based on the book Web of Betrayal by me, Nicola Tallant. I'm Nicola Tallant and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.